Chat people, jump in whenever you want. This is so exciting. Oh my God. Game one, Nets Bucks. What a fantastic start to an amazing series. Bucks, Nets. I mean, I don't even know how I'm going to be able to describe what happened there exactly. Let me just click this link and see if this is like actually the thing that's happening right now. Oh Lord, let me just delete that. Coming back to you, folks. But it's just so incredible that the I mean, there's all these caveats, right? Like we can talk about how the Bucks didn't get any free throw shooting and all of that stuff, like or 3-point shooting, fine. But come on, I mean, the game itself was so thrilling from a Nets perspective that sorry, I'm just tweeting out the link. Everyone. Nets Bucks game one. I mean, to start, I don't want to even talk about James Harden. I'm not going to have a discussion about James Harden in this moment. Obviously, we're going to find out more. They said on the broadcast that he went to the hospital to get an MRI immediately. But we had Kevin Durant, 29 points, 10 rebounds, absolutely a thrilling performance, playing 40 minutes in that game. Kyrie played 45 minutes in this game. But beyond that, the most surprising minutes load possible. And this, like, there's no way that anyone could have seen this coming, is that Mike James, Mr. Moscow, Mike James, gets 30 minutes in this game, and he was actually good. And you know what? I have a history with Mike. I was a little afraid of if he was ever inserted in a playoff game, exactly how he would perform. I thought it was going to be a lot of bad, ill-advised jumpers. This game, like, he was playing smart. Yeah, he took 11 shots, but he was actually kind of pacing himself to some degree. It was kind of incredible. It was as devastating as it was for it to initially come out that thank you, Necro Bry Guy. Did Blake just go Super Saiyan? Absolutely. And is that Brian Egan? Is that my actual co-host? I apologize if it is. Mike James. Who could have guessed? Who could have guessed that Mike James was going to come out and absolutely dominate in the way that he did? Oh, there's so much to enjoy. Let's just go through the box score and enjoy and revel in exactly what happened. So yes, 115-107 Nets win over the Bucks. The Bucks shoot 20% from three, 6 for 30 from three. Not only that, they shoot 11 for 19 from the free throw line. They shoot 58%. Giannis was 0 for 3 from the free throw line. Giannis actually had a pretty good game. I mean, he had 34 points, 11 rebounds, and 4 assists. But I got to tell you, there's moments where, and this happens with every Giannis game, where like he just disappears. He doesn't have an effect. 5 turnovers in the game versus 4 assists. He wasn't distributing the ball. Not that he ever really does. Drew Holiday wasn't the devastating defensive force that I was scared of and anticipating. Chris Middleton was an absolute mess. Missing everything. 0 for 5 from 3. Oh, so delicious. And, oh my God, let's talk about these Nets. 29 points, Kevin Durant. 25 points, Kyrie Irving. Joe Harris, 19. 5 from 9 from 3. Blake Griffin. What a scrappy performance from Blake. I mean, this sort of like immediate transformation. The thing to think about Blake Griffin is that, yeah, so he didn't play well in Detroit this season, but the season before that and the season before that, he was the best player on that team, right? He was the star of that team. And he goes into this season, doesn't really play all that well, but obviously allows himself to be bought out. He sacrifices a lot of money. And immediately by coming to the Nets, he turns into this like ultra fit in wherever you want to role player. There's the thing about octopus. Octopus don't have bones. Octopi, I guess, is the plural. And so they can fit into tiny spaces. I mean, we've all seen Finding Dory, right? The sequel to Finding Nemo. They can slither into small places. Blake is an octopus. He can fit into any little small place on the court, scrapping on the court to an unbelievable degree. Oh, my Lord. What a performance. Brandon San Giovanni. We can talk about Nick Claxton. We haven't talked enough about Nick Claxton, and you're 100% right about that, because Nick Claxton, the Giannis, like the pest that he is to Giannis, it's a real thing. It's not an imaginary thing. Like, obviously, so Giannis at 34. Let's see how many points the Brand DeLorean in the Discord. Shout to you. Shout to the Discord audience. Shout to everyone who is in the Discord. And if you're not, links in the Twitter bio. It's a place to be during games. It's a great conversation. It's a safe zone for big thoughts. Claxton only played 14 minutes, 4 points, a block, an assist, a steal, and 3 rebounds. But his block was, I feel like he had more than one block, but his block on, who was it, Middleton or someone like that, incredible. When you shifted on to Giannis for a couple of possessions, I mean, plus minus is silly, right? Plus minus is a silly stat, but I'm going to reference it. Plus 11 for your 14 minutes of Nick Claxton. So there's a couple of keys to the game, right? I mean, you have to say that James Harden got hurt. Like, that's a key to the game. That happened. I'm eagerly anticipating what it's going to be. Obviously, it's a right hamstring injury. That's funny. We got a funny tweet here. So who knows? It's so tough to predict exactly. The fact that he's getting an MRI, at least I believe that's what was reported during the game on the TNT broadcast. Like, I think they always would do an MRI. I'm not going to try to Twitter doctor this, so I'm just going to wait to see what happens. I'm waiting for the tweet from Shams Charania to tell us exactly what's going on. But that's a key to the game, right? James Harden plays less than a minute. I think it was 43 seconds and is knocked out. By the way, he got a rebound, so his per 36 for the game is probably even better than 36 rebounds for the entire game. Incredible for him. The Bucks not hitting any shots, and you could tell which media members pick the Bucks in this series because they would love to point that out. They talked about, the Bucks aren't gonna shoot 20% from three the entire series. Yeah, duh, we know that. I think we all understand that. But if there's a game where the Nets' big three is turned into a big two and Mike James is getting 30 minutes, it's one of those things like, if I told you that before the game, you would guess that the Bucks probably blew out the Nets. And the Nets pretty firmly, I want to say dominated, but they pretty firmly beat the Bucks. So much so that Budenholzer pulled the starters with 3 minutes left in the game. I thought that was kind of incredible. I think it was only a 17-point lead, and the Bucks bench even kind of clawed it back for a moment. I don't know. I mean, that was an interesting moment. Gideon Yulip, Brooklyn celebs over Knicks celebs. I don't want to say it, but I'm saying it. Jay-Z, Beyonce, ASAP, ASAP Rocky was there. An incredible thank you, Matt, I'm on the Blair Witch Project. I'm in the extremely creepy office area here that I am in. I wanted to add to the mystique of sort of this moment, the horrible moment that the Bucks should be feeling. This was a game, like the narrative of a series of the Bucks are going to play better, they're going to shoot better. But this is a game that they should feel dejected. They should feel upset that they didn't do better because they allowed Mike James and Blake Griffin to beat them. Sure, Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving both played great and played well, but it was a game. And it also, I thought what was interesting about it is the Bucks were so devastating in that Miami Heat series. They had the best point differential in terms of the first round matchups compared to any other first round matchup. They swept them. I think they won the average score that they had over the Heat were something like plus 20 or something like some incredible number. So the idea is going to the series, if you supported the Bucks, it's like, wow, the Bucks have all this momentum. They have the talent to stop them defensively. The Bucks lost. And yeah, I mean, if they shot better, they would have done better. So what? The Nets played well enough that it wasn't such a big deal. This is so damn exciting that they won this game. It has to provide an incredible boost to the Nets. Again, it's like, I don't know. I mean, who knows what's happening with Harden? Harden, that's the big question. And Matt Parker, are you worried about Steve Nash looking gaunt AF? Steve is a well-known devotee of the diet. That's what he's all about. I support him in whatever body he wants to be living in. But it was just incredible. Let's do the Mike James breakdown. So the thing I loved about Mike James, okay, he still shot 11 shots from the field, which is like a crazy number for a guy who on most playoff teams, if you had the Mike James scenario being a guy who was, like a 10-day contract guy at the end of the season, he got some run, but again, 10-day contract guy, and then he gets whatever. I think he has like a 1+1 deal right now. That guy would never, if he was in the Milwaukee Bucks, he wouldn't play. If he was under Mike Budenholzer, he wouldn't play. And I understand the James Harden injury, but still, like in the progression of guards that you think Steve Nash would go to, Shamet, you put him in there, or Bruce Brown. Tyler Johnson obviously was the surprise guard in round one. There's something extremely interesting going on with the way that Steve Nash is deploying his bench in these games, in these playoff games. He obviously prepared Tyler Johnson for the role that he was going to be in against the Celtics. Is something like that happening with Mike James? Again, I understand the James Harden injury. That's why Mike James got 30 minutes compared to maybe he would have got 15. But he was in the lineup enough over, even if you compare his minutes to Shamet. Shamet got just 12 minutes in this game. Tyler Johnson got a minute because they put him in at the last minute of the game. He got more minutes than Bruce Brown. Mike James did. So there's something that Nash is doing where he's preparing these bench players for specific roles in each series. And the only guy he didn't get in on the roster is DeAndre Jordan again. I don't know what's happening with that. I mean, I predicted that he was going to be in. Manuel says, it feels like we somehow kept the young, plucky, next man up mentality, even with the stars. I think that's right. The stay ready group, right? Isn't that what, there's something going on where, I think it's like Nash's closeness as a player. Like the fact that he was there, he was very recently was there as a player. I don't love TLC. Yeah, no TLC. Very recently a player. I imagine that he still thinks, if this guy's in the NBA, there's value I can get out of him. If I can prepare him for a certain circumstance. The differences that I saw in Mike James' game, which I liked, and there should be, right? Because before, when he would play like with the bench units, and now he was playing with Kyrie and Kevin Durant. He still had confident shots. He still had I hit the last shot, I'm going to take the next one. But they were better shots. They were more contained. They were more exact. Brian Newman says, loving the solo show, Mike. Have you finally ditched that Claxton hater, Brian? Absolutely. He wanted to come on this show. He was not allowed on this show. After the performance that Nick Claxton had in those 12 minutes, wasn't allowed. I wouldn't allow it. He's calling me right now. I have my phone on silent. I won't allow him to come on the show because this is a moment to celebrate. I don't want to hear his Claxton hate. I just don't. I don't want to hear the hate he has for Mike. He hates Mike James. I don't. I have no hate in my bones. No hate. How about that Shamet dunk? Yes, James. Absolutely, that Shamet. That one came out. That was one of those surprising, he's way too far to dunk it. Dunk. The crowd was phenomenal tonight. Phenomenal. Oh my Lord. Um, there has to be like I don't know if there's elation in the Nets locker room because they're probably really worried about James Harden, right? But I don't know. You got to feel confident. The Bucks are the team that haven't been able to break through in the playoffs. They don't have championship experience. They brought in Drew Holiday, and Drew Holiday hasn't won anything either. He's a playoff type player, but he hasn't won anything either. And the kind of the scary element about the Bucks, it was the way they dismissed the Heat, the team that knocked the Bucks out of the playoffs last year. The Bucks get revenge. So maybe they're on this revenge path, sort of the way that the Spurs were after they lost the Miami Heat in the finals and they came back and won the championship. Maybe the Bucks were going to do that. And they may still, who knows. But they go into this game. They don't look even that good. I know people are going to point to the 3-point percentages like, oh, that's a thing. They didn't look good. Right? Like if they would look better if they hit 45% of the threes. I understand. I think we all understand that here in this beautiful YouTube space that we're in. But they didn't look active as much. Blake Griffin was the most dedicated guy to stopping the action out there on the floor. I mean, I made the joke on Twitter. Is Blake the first buyout guy that deserves to have his jersey hung in the rafters? Maybe. I mean, the Blake Griffin experience, stupendous, excellent. You can't even. There's nothing you can say about his performance. I mean, it's the type of thing that you need to have happen if you're going to be a team that's going to win big games in the playoffs, right? Like you need to have. You need to have these. So we talked about it in our pod, a great pod, season preview pod. If you want to listen, or series preview pod, if you want to listen to it, please do. It's still there. It still holds. Obviously, one of the things that maybe has dated is the fact that we said the net that needs to have the best series for the Nets to win was James Harden. But again, the Nets won without James Harden. Without James Harden being on there. 1 second. I'm going to tweet out the link again, get more people in the chat. We got to get some James Harden update. If anyone hears about it, just put it in the chat. Let us know what's happening. I'm sure it's going to be one of those things. I mean, there's no reason for them to update. There's no reason for them to update for what was happening with him tonight. I don't know how quickly they probably get back MRIs pretty quickly and all that stuff. So, God, what a good game. The crowd was fired up. You jinxed him. Thanks, Matt. Yeah, we kind of did. I feel terrible. Matt Parker with a great question. Who gets the game ball? So there's a lot of options, right? You could go obvious. You could go Kyrie or KD. They obviously had the most productive games. I think it's Blake. I think Blake gets it for his activity, his ruggedness, his diving on the floor like he's some walk-on at Duke. Blake deserves the game ball. What Durant and Irving did is pretty much what they do. That they were great. They were excellent. I loved the moment at the end of the third quarter when Durant picks up his fourth foul and he says he wants to stay in the game. Now, I'll be honest, Durant probably did foul Blake like twice basically after that moment, but I think even Durant understands that like the refs are leery to continue to pile up fouls on a star like that. And I'm usually a proponent of not pulling guys if they have 4 fouls because you still have to get 2 fouls to foul out of the game. It's still a lot of fouls to get in the moment. But I love Durant was completely locked in, as he should be. Kyrie had 8 assists, which he had to sort of replace the playmaking that James Harden left away. And Kyrie this year really hasn't been like a big assist guy. I think he's had 5 assists a game. So he stepped up big. But Blake was the player of the game. You're like, if James Harden's out of the game, which he was, The Nets needed contributions in a big way from Joe Harris, and they got it. 7 from 11 from the field, 5 from 9 from 3. But they needed bench players or Blake to provide scoring. Blake shot 4 for 9 from 3. Fantastic. He's still a little, he had an air ball 3. But none of that, that's just like, it doesn't matter. He put it out there. And I know he complains about fouls all the time. As much as people want to talk about, the Bucks didn't shoot the ball all that well from 3, and they did shoot horribly. The Nets only had 9 free throw attempts the entire game. 3 of them were from Nick Claxton. Kyrie did not take a single free throw. He was driving through the lane the whole time. Durant took 4 free throw attempts, and obviously he was incredibly active and had the ball in his hand all the time. I kind of think the refs were more favorable to the Bucks. So if we want to talk about regression and we want to talk about sort of regressing to the mean or progressing to the mean, whichever way you want to go, I don't know. I think I'm surprised that the Nets didn't get more calls. It felt like it was very pro-Bucks. It was a pro-Buck referee crew. Claxton 2 for 3. Yeah. Giannis was worse from the line. This is the type of game, if you're a Bucks fan, you're worried. You're absolutely worried. Giannis was fantastic. If you look at his stat line, I think 34 points, whatever, 12 rebounds or whatever it was. Fantastic. But he shrunk. He shrunk in the big moment. He couldn't bring his team back in the way that maybe Kevin Durant could in certain moments, or James Harden if he was healthy, or Kyrie Irving. It was very regular season Giannis. And Middleton, as James points out in the chat, couldn't do it. Wasn't good. Bad. Now they're going to come out shooting better. They're going to come out shooting better. That's fine. I also think the Nets have a better way to go. They have a better way to play. Just think about how oddly, sort of devastating it is. A guy as important as James Harden is removed from the game within the first minute, in the 43-second mark, removed from the game. And you as a team have to immediately adapt, immediately lock in. Kyrie moves from the 2 to the 1. Durant takes more of a ball handling responsibility, and someone like Mike James comes in and has to provide, stability. At times, James was bringing up the ball even though he was on the floor with Kyrie and Durant. So we could talk about regression and progression. The fact that the Nets had to react in the moment to roles changing, and they successfully did so. Meaning that first quarter, which should have been their worst quarter, it was 32-30. And then the Nets won the second quarter, they won the third quarter, and they lost the fourth. But no one cared in that fourth quarter. We just need to see a little bit more information about what's going on with James Harden. We just need to see a little bit more info. Let's see I'm trying to read out. Let's see what people on Twitter are saying. I'm hoping something pops up at some point. I guess Durant spoke about it. Durant said, this is from Mike Scotto on Twitter. Shit sucks. It sucks because I want him to be out there. I know how much he cares. I know how much he wants to be in this moment. I wish him a speedy recovery. We're going to keep him involved as much as possible. It's just a bad break. One of the Twitter doctors that is out there was tweeting about how with hamstring injuries or soft tissue injuries, the first time you get the injury is the quickest recovery you have, and the risk for re-injury raises considerably, and usually rehab is longer. Now, the interesting thing with James Harden's injury, though, is that I wouldn't base his recovery time for this one, just saying it's the same. Let's just assume it's the same based off of his last recovery, because the Nets were taking a very conservative approach, hoping to minimize the chance for re-injury. So I mean, it's an interesting situation. We just don't know. We don't have enough information. This is Loopy E in the chat. Very good point. I love this point. Tucker as advertised, but Holiday was good enough, but he certainly didn't erase Kyrie or anything of the sort. There was weird things happening with the Bucks. There were moments Drew Holiday wasn't in, like, always on Kyrie. You figure if Harden's out, Drew Holiday is just on Kyrie like Jalen Ramsey's on the top wide receiver for whatever team he's playing against, right? You figure that's the scenario. That's not what happened. That's not what happened at all. Drew Holiday was like on Mike James at times. Not even when Mike James was like actively going to that. Just like Mike James didn't have the ball. He was off ball, and Drew Holiday was on him. I think there's a lot that the Bucks need to do to fix what went wrong. Like, again, we talked about the three. There was things that could be happening. But I don't know. I think it's interesting. It was an interesting game. Blake Griffin was incredible. Mike James was incredible. Durant was locked in, engaged. And I think that's sort of like, if you're trying to separate what's the difference between what happened with the Celtics and what happened with the Bucks, the Nets obviously like dominated the Celtics. They blew them out in some games. They just overwhelmed them with talent. But still, like the Nets' energy was more regular season energy than postseason energy. And I think by watching that, it could lead to the impression that, maybe the Nets aren't as good as we think they are, right? I really think what was happening was that the Nets knew that without Jaylen Brown, that the Celtics were never going to do anything in that series of any consequence. And so there was like a lack of motivation. I mean, we even saw it on the floor at times. There's just like kind of like an arrogance. Like, we're not going to try that hard on defense because we know we're going to win. We're going to shoot it well enough and we're going to score well enough. That just doesn't matter. The Nets had like all this room sort of to grow. Their ceiling is higher, right? With the Bucks, they were probably so motivated in that first round series against the Heat because of what happened in their history with the Miami Heat. So there was like the Bucks are firing on cylinders. They have all the motivation in the world. Round two, they're probably, frankly, overconfident. And James Harden gets hurt. And I would imagine in their minds, it kind of shifts the mood a little bit. And they were just too confident. Let's look at the Bucks for a sec. So we talk about PJ Tucker. PJ Tucker actually had a pretty good game for what he usually is. 7 points, 2 steals, an assist, and 4 rebounds. 1 for 4 from 3. Like, if you can get, like, my big fear is that if PJ Tucker has that sort of, like, strange 15-point game where he's 5 from 6 from 3, right? Like, that would be a bad sign. Giannis, 34 points, 11 rebounds on 24 field goal attempts, 2 for 5 from 3. Pretty good for him. But Middleton bad, 0 for 5 from 3. Brook was really a problem all game, but he still only scored 19 points on eight field goals, but 19 points, not like devastating. And Drew Holiday wasn't that good, and he didn't have that good of a scoring game. And no one on the bench stepped up to any degree. Fantastic. Shout out Sean Marks. Exactly, Nick. Incredible. Oh, my God. What a game. What an exciting game. I mean, the dunks were great. How much fun are dunks? They are so exciting. I was impressed by the crowd. I was impressed by the effort that the Nets gave out in the game. There was a good flow to it. I like that there was a sense of there was a really good sense of when Kyrie and Kevin Durant had to attack. It almost is kind of helpful if it's not the big three, because if all three are on the floor, there's like sort of an awkwardness that is going on sometimes. And that's fine because they're so sensational that there's just going to be, it's rare for guys to play with talents like themselves together. But Thank you, Nathan. Who else here got receipts emailing Blue Guys mailbags in 2015? Shouts to you for being involved. I mean, what a blessed day. We're all here together. We're still into the Nets and what's happening. And your fortitude has been served proudly. But Kyrie, Durant looked incredible. Blake was amazing. Thank you, Nathan. Yes, we here. There you go. That's also, isn't that the Knicks saying we here? Well, where'd they go? Game 2. Let's do a segment, right? We'll do one of our famous segments. The 3 things I'm going to be wondering about, and I'm not going to include James Harden in that. What type of energy do the Bucks come out with? Because even though they weren't hitting shots, I still felt like their energy wasn't that good. Matt Parker brings up a good point. Minutes for Kyrie, 45. It's kind of a necessity. It was just a playoff necessity at this point with James Harden being out. So what's the energy for the Bucks coming out? How much more do they exploit the mismatches that Brook Lopez was creating? Right? Because even though I felt like they found him more and more in the second half. They found him more and more, and he became more and more disruptive. And frankly, the Nets just don't have anyone that really fixes that question. Like Blake tried, but often what would happen is Joe Harris or Kyrie or someone who couldn't ever handle Brook Lopez was getting switched onto Brook. So it's interesting. So I'm wondering energy from the Bucks. I'm wondering how much more they try to attack with the Brook Lopez moment. But then I'm also wondering, I didn't really want to talk about the James Harden injury, but I'll say more from this angle. Does the Mike James experiment, the Mikey Jimmy experiment continue? If so, what does he do? Is it does he get 30 more minutes, or is it more evenly distributed, right? Is it more like Mike James gets 20, Landry Shamet's minutes gets bumped up, Bruce Brown's minutes gets bumped up? It's all of that. I'm interested to see how Steve Nash accounts for that. It's Tyler Johnson. He was a factor in the Celtics series. He was not a factor tonight in the game. Maybe you think he would get minutes. I wonder if that's going to happen. I don't know. It's intriguing. I would really like to know what the hell. Is anyone able to go to all the hospitals in New York right now and figure out exactly what's going on? Crimson Striker says Bruce is starting, no doubt. That is an interesting question. It's let's figure out the starting lineups, right? Durant, Irving, Joe Harris, Blake, and probably Bruce Brown, right? Probably Bruce Brown, yeah. I mean, because you want to bring Mike James off the bench, and they need the ball here. It's so crazy that Mike James is a factor, as big of a factor as he was. Still surprised. I mean, again, they really do limit Nick Claxton's minutes. He's so effective when he's in, even though it doesn't really show up in the traditional box score. He has such an impact on the game defensively. He forced a really bad shot from Middleton at one point. He forced Giannis to have a turnover in another circumstance. There just must be something happening. It must be injury related. It must be a minutes restriction, because particularly in a game where Brook Lopez was so effective, you would think Nick Claxton would have got a more run, and he doesn't. We have some good chat about maybe Shamet starting. I could see that too. The thing is that they're kind of shifting further away from Landry Shamet a little bit. He's playing, obviously, he's a role. He's always going to play in every game. But there's some shift kind of away from him. I don't think they don't. Nathan brings this up. I don't think they really do have that faith that he's as much of a shooter. I remember him as a rookie on the 76ers, and the belief was oh shit, the 76ers found they're another version of JJ Redick. He goes to the Clippers, doesn't he doesn't shoot that well. He comes here, shoots okay, fine. I like him on the floor, but he really doesn't expand the floor as much as I think the thought of him did, right? It's gonna be a dilemma. Matt Parker, he says, are you surprised we didn't see any DJ? Frankly, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I predicted game one we would see him. I mean, ultimately, if you kind of look at the minutes distribution, let's say Nick Claxton is a center, right? So 14 minutes for him. Blake Griffin was 35 minutes, and he was basically the center. And at times Durant was guarding Brook, and that's where he got some fouls. And you don't want that, because Brook is still, as much as maybe he's diminished as the offensive force that he was back in the day, as much as he's not that anymore, he's still crafty enough and powerful enough that he could basically get Kevin Durant fouled out of the game if Durant's at the 5. The Bucks stuck with Brook at the 5, even though the Nets were, I think, manipulating and they had a bunch of space offensively because Brook was still at the 5, and he wasn't, if you don't know about the Bucks, he drops back and he basically tries to guard the basket in every possible circumstance. They don't want Brook running around the perimeter to try to chase after shooters or anything like that. So the Nets, I think, they took advantage. I mean, if we were talking about three-point shooting, the Nets shot 37.5% from 3. That's a fine night. That's a good night. But that's not an incredible three-point shooting night. It looks better, and it is way better. They made 15 threes, and the Bucks made 6. And so that's a massive difference in terms of point production from the three-point line. I completely understand that. The Nets ended up making 46 shots overall from the field, and the Bucks made 45. So when you see that, and it's usually comes down to 3-point, the Bucks shot 19 free throws and the Nets shot 9. The Bucks made more, but they shot a horrible percentage from the free throw line. But you're going to get that, and Giannis Antetokounmpo's there. Really interesting. If the Nets shot the same 3 percentage as the Bucks, the story would definitely be the Bucks defense. That, Loopy E, is a great point. People would be flipping out. The anti-Nets Twitter national media basketball writer mafia would be coming out of the woodwork saying, wow, look what the Bucks did. Look what the Bucks defense did to the once powerful Nets. They disrupted them so much. But when the Nets do it to the Bucks, no one's saying that. They're saying they're unlucky. Come on. We have to see through that. We all see through that, right? Yeah, the Bucks, though, were unlucky. Though, but I think the Nets did a better job defensively during this game than they definitely did during the Celtics. Yeah, but there was 2 games during the Celtics series, so the Nets did play good defense. Matt Parker, do we bust out a hack of Giannis at some point? Hack of Giannis is going to be interesting. It's going to be deployed. But if we remember, there was a regular season game against the Bucks where the Nets did some hack Giannis, and they also kind of let Giannis have his shot. Giannis gained confidence because he hit his shot off of those things. So it's kind of an interesting case where, like, hacky Giannis can either sap Giannis of confidence, or it could let him gain it, because if he hits some free throws, then he's beginning to feel even better about himself, and then he's more aggressive and he attacks more in those circumstances. So we'll see. Game 2 is going to be incredibly crucial, because if I'm the Nets, and Nathan, you're bringing up the 10-second free throw, I love that. I don't know if everyone saw this, but the Barclays had a clock when Giannis was at the line, a free throw shot clock for the 10 seconds. Fantastic. Needs to keep that up. Fans need to be changing that all the time. But the Game 2, I mean, the Nets won the home opener of the series, right? It's a game that the Nets were favoring in that they should have won. Now, if you dive into the story of the game, again, James Harden being gone, negative for the Nets. 3-point shooting for the Bucks, negative for the Bucks. Nets win. So that's amazing. I think the Bucks are going to come out motivated in game 2 because they know that maybe Harden will come back later in the series. I'm going to guess Harden's not going to play in game 2, even though there's a good amount of distance in this. I think, what's the next game? Isn't it like Monday? Maybe it's Monday or something like that. So not as much distance. But I'm interested to see how they come out. If the Nets can win game 2, protect home court, then you can go to Milwaukee and you don't want to lose the next 2 games. But at least if you do, you're buttressed, right? You're protected. You have a moat around you a bit. If you win those 2, if you win this next game, and you almost have to kind of like sell out to win game 2, and then understand that if the Bucks are going to go home, they're probably going to win game 3. They're such a good team. A lot depends on James Harden. What I do want to see from Nash, right? So we saw this curveball of Mike James. I don't think it freaked the Bucks out, right? I'm not saying that necessarily, but it definitely is something they didn't prepare for. They did. I guarantee, as prepared as these teams are, the players maybe received a Mike James page in their scouting report of the Nets. I don't think any of them read it. Do you think they actually read that thing? But does Nash have another wrinkle that he can throw in for game 2 because he doesn't have Harden? Is there something else he can turn to? DeAndre Jordan would be one of them, but he's not exactly a ripple effect of the Harden injury. I think Alizé Johnson has a role in this series at some point. I don't know when that is or what that is, but I think he does. Bruce Brown didn't play all that well. Maybe he plays better in game 2, and that's the difference. But anyways, incredible game. So exciting. So thrilling. I'm so happy that it's over with and it's a win, because if it was a loss, oh my Lord. Crimson Striker has a great point. Jeff Green, possible to come back. Jeff Green would be a big addition because as well as Blake played tonight, there's no shot that Blake will ever play as good as he played tonight in this series, right? That was the Blake game. That was the game you got from Blake to get the win. The Nets need Jeff Green. They need he's just a more reliable 3-point shooter. You can count on him. You know where he's going to be on the floor. There's some funny stuff in the chat, and I appreciate all of you. Hilarious stuff. Jeff Green is going to be a key point. He looks good on the sidelines. If I'm again Twitter doctor here, he was jumping up in celebration a lot. So let's see if we can get on the floor. Anyways, I'm going to jump off the stream. Appreciate you all for being here. We will pod probably after game 2. So check out, dive into your Apple Podcast or Spotify app. Listen to that. Thank you for staying up, everyone. Appreciate you. Appreciate all of you. All right. End stream. Bye, guys.